He walked in with his mother, looking like a slum kid, his clothes worn and simple. But when Zane Lopes sat down at that chessboard, the room fell silent. No one knew that the boy they'd dismissed would be the one to shatter their world of privilege. Buckle up, my story family. This is a journey of unexpected triumph that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Let me tell you this story. In the sleek, high-rise penthouse of Sarah Caldwell, the atmosphere buzzed with the hum of luxury. Guests, draped in expensive suits and gowns, clinked champagne flutes and mingled, their voices rising in a symphony of idle chatter. It was a night for charity, or so Sarah Caldwell would have had everyone believe. But her intentions were anything but generous. Sarah, a successful entrepreneur with the kind of wealth that could buy silence and admiration, looked down at the room with a sense of smug satisfaction. She hosted events like this all the time, inviting powerful figures, business moguls, council members, and their polished wives, because it reaffirmed her place at the top. But tonight wasn't about charity. It was about proving something. Zane Lopes, her housekeeper's son, was an accessory to her plan. At 17, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through the laughter and conversation, Zane stood awkwardly to the side, balancing a tray of appetizers. His movements were measured, deliberate, as he made his way through the crowd of well-dressed strangers. His mother, Maria, had worked tirelessly for years in Sarah's home, scrubbing floors, cooking meals, and doing whatever was required. But tonight, Zane felt more like a servant than ever before. His mother's low-paying job and the quiet dignity with which she carried it out had always kept them on the margins. But this night, this particular moment, felt different. Sarah, standing near the fireplace in a dress so expensive it might as well have been woven from gold, noticed Zane's quiet presence. Her eyes glinted with the sort of amusement that only comes from having complete power over someone else. With a tilt of her head, she called to him, her voice dripping with condescension. "Zane, come here, will you?" Her words cut through the room like a blade. "Let's see if you know how to play chess, like the wealthy people do. It'll be a good laugh, won't it?" The room erupted into laughter, soft, controlled chuckles that were both dismissive and amused. The guests, polished and perfect in their designer clothes, exchanged amused glances. Zane's mother, Maria, who had been quietly serving drinks from the kitchen, paused for a moment. Her heart twisted as she watched the young man she had raised with so much care stand at the center of it all, about to be used as entertainment. She had spent 20 years in this very penthouse, doing everything to ensure her son had a better future, but never once being seen as anything more than the help. Tonight, her son's calm, measured steps into the spotlight would be the most painful humiliation of all. Zane stood still for a moment, absorbing the laughter, the judgment. His eyes scanned the room, taking in every face, every sneer, every chuckle behind the champagne flutes. But something about the way he carried himself, his straight posture, and the stillness of his gaze, stopped the laughter from feeling like a victory. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't even angry. He had been through too much in his young life to let mockery tear him down. He'd learned a long time ago to embrace silence, to listen more than he spoke, to watch and wait. Without a word, Zane stepped forward. He placed his tray down on a nearby table, his fingers brushing the surface with a quiet, deliberate movement. There was no hesitation in his actions, no sign of unease. When he spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, and utterly devoid of any sign of doubt. "I'd be happy to play," he said, his words cutting through the noise like a sharp, clear note. Sarah's smile grew wider, more satisfied, as she gestured to the grand marble chessboard on the table in front of her. The intricate pieces, made of ivory and ebony, gleamed under the chandelier light, an ostentatious display of wealth. Sarah settled into a chair, watching Zane with a look that was a mixture of superiority and amusement. "Well then," she said, her voice sweet as honey but sharp underneath, "let's see how you do. A game of chess is a bit different from what you're used to, I assume. Let's have some fun with this." Zane's eyes shifted to the board, his gaze slowing just for a fraction of a second, but long enough to see the mocking tone in her voice. He was used to this, used to being underestimated, used to the sneers, the silent challenges. But this was no game. He took a breath and began moving the pieces, one by one, his fingers gliding across the squares with the precision of someone who had studied these moves 1,000 times over. As he began arranging his pieces, Sarah's smirk faltered, just slightly. The others in the room exchanged glances, some curious, others incredulous. While his classmates were playing video games, Zane was scouring books and watching Grandmasters matches late into the night. The game began with Sarah, eager to impress, confidently making her first move, a pawn to e4. It was the kind of opening she had learned at her exclusive book club, a move that, in her mind, would establish her dominance. She leaned back in her chair, looking around the room for a moment, a smug smile curling at the corners of her lips. "Ah, the classic opening," she said loudly, ensuring her guests heard. "It's from my book club, you know." The guests nodded, pretending to follow along, their attention divided between the game and their conversations. Sarah was clearly relishing the moment, eager to prove that even the youngest, most unpolished of the guests could play this sophisticated game, if only under the right guidance. Zane didn't look up as he responded. His fingers moved across the board with precision, almost as if he were in a trance. With a swift motion, he moved his pawn to c5, setting up the Sicilian defense. The room fell silent. There was a slight murmur of confusion, followed by the quietest ripple of realization. Sarah, her brow furrowing, glanced at Zane. She hadn't expected this. She had anticipated a slow, fumbling game, one where her every move would go unchallenged. This wasn't just any move. This was a strategic response from someone who knew the game far better than she had anticipated. "Interesting," she muttered, trying to cover her surprise. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she quickly moved a knight to f3, the familiar move intended to develop her pieces and take control. She had seen it done in books, had read about it in articles, and for a moment she tried to convince herself that she was still in control. Zane didn't respond with words. He simply moved another piece, rapidly, with purpose, developing his knight to c6. His fingers moved so swiftly it seemed as though he were anticipating each moment before it even arrived. There was no hesitation in him, no uncertainty. He wasn't just playing the game, he was orchestrating it, as if he had played this same scenario hundreds of times in his mind. Sarah's initial confidence began to crumble. The movements Zane made were quick and deliberate, each one placing pressure on her. She glanced at her guests, searching their faces for some kind of validation, but found only silence. They were watching now, no longer with the amusement they had felt earlier. Their eyes were wide, focused on the board. As they began to understand that Zane wasn't just another servant, they were witnessing something different, something extraordinary. Sarah's fingers tightened around her queen, and for the first time, she felt a wave of doubt creeping in. Her once smirking face began to lose its composure. Zane's calmness, his calculated efficiency, was doing something that she couldn't quite explain. It was unbalancing her. Her eyes shifted back to the board, scanning it for any advantage, but Zane's pieces were perfectly positioned. There was no space for error, no gap in his defense. Every move he made seemed to force her into a corner, stripping her of her options. She had expected to dominate this game easily, but Zane wasn't playing by her rules. He was playing his own game, one that had been honed by years of discipline, not by a privileged upbringing. Maria stood in the corner, her hands clenched together, her body tense. As she watched her son, her heart swelled with pride. She had known he was good, had seen him spend hours at the library, poring over old chess books, practicing strategies alone in their small apartment. But seeing him play against Sarah, in front of these powerful people, was something else entirely. This wasn't just about a game of chess. It was about something much bigger. Zane wasn't just challenging Sarah. He was challenging a system. He was showing that talent could not be measured by money, status, or the elitism of the people in this room. The pressure was mounting. With every piece Zayn moved, Sarah's confidence waned, until it began to feel less like a game and more like a battle for her dignity. She couldn't keep up. Zayn wasn't just a boy from the slums. He was a force, and the realization hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. The laughter from earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by a new tension that filled the space. Each move Zayn made felt like a calculated strike, one that was forcing Sarah into a corner, making her uncomfortable with every piece she moved. The game progressed, and with each move, Zayn's control over the board became more apparent. His hands moved with a fluid grace, almost as if the pieces were extensions of his own thoughts. His pace was quickening now, each move executed with precise deliberation, while Sarah found herself struggling to keep up. The guests, once indifferent, were now watching intently, their eyes flicking back and forth from Zayn to Sarah. The shift in energy was palpable. It was clear now that Zayn wasn't just playing. He was in complete command of the game. Sarah, once so confident, was now visibly rattled. Her fingers tapped nervously on the edge of the table as she tried to maintain her composure, but each of Zayn's moves felt like another small crack in her carefully constructed world. Then it happened. Zayn made a move so unexpected that the entire room seemed to freeze. He moved one of his pawns, seemingly giving up a valuable piece without a second thought. The room fell into stunned silence. Guests whispered in hushed tones, trying to understand what had just happened. Marcus, a businessman with a reputation as a former chess champion, leaned forward, his eyes widening as he observed the board. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, "this kid is setting up a dragon variation. It's one of the hardest to counter." Sarah's lips curled into a tight smile. But it was no longer the confident grin of someone in control. She knew the dragon variation well. It was a tactical masterstroke, an aggressive defense that allowed a player to sacrifice material to gain a superior position. She had heard of it, even read about it, but she had never expected to see it played so flawlessly, especially not by a boy she had once considered beneath her. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the pieces, suddenly unsure of her next move. Zayn, on the other hand, was already 3 steps ahead, maneuvering with a speed and precision that rattled her. His moves flowed seamlessly, each one more intricate than the last, as if he were crafting a masterpiece rather than simply playing a game. With every piece he moved, Sarah's confidence crumbled further. She could no longer rely on her usual tricks, the moves she had perfected over the years to intimidate opponents. Zayn's eyes remained focused on the board, but Sarah could feel his gaze shift toward her. There was something unsettling about the calmness in his expression. It wasn't the gaze of a servant trying to win favor. It was the stare of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, someone who had earned every move he made. "Do you want to know the truth, Miss Caldwell?" Zayn asked, his voice steady, cutting through the tension in the room. Sarah blinked, unsure of how to respond. Her mind raced, but her words faltered. "What do you mean?" Zayn's gaze met hers with a quiet intensity. "I didn't come here to be humiliated. I spent years learning chess, dreaming of competing against people who respect the game, who understand that talent isn't about money or background." The room fell silent. The guests, who had been watching with a mix of amusement and curiosity, were now fully captivated by the truth behind Zayn's words. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. No one had expected this. Sarah had thought she was teaching him a lesson, but in reality, it was Zayn who was teaching everyone in the room something far more valuable. For a moment, Sarah didn't know what to say. She had underestimated him, her thoughts consumed with her own image, her own world of wealth and superiority. But now she was facing the undeniable reality that Zayn was not only a skilled player, but someone who had spent years honing his craft, someone whose worth was determined by his dedication and talent, not his background. Zayn's next move was the final one. He gently moved his queen into position, a deliberate, and precise action that trapped Sarah's king. The realization hit Sarah like a thunderclap. She was done. There was no escape, no clever move left to save her. "Checkmate," Zane said calmly, his voice low, his fingers gently tapping the final square. For a long moment, Sarah sat frozen, her gaze locked onto the chessboard, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just unfolded. The weight of the loss settled heavily on her shoulders, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. Her hands trembled as she desperately tried to process the game. "No, no, this isn't possible," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "You must have seen that sequence somewhere. It's not real." Zane stood up with an air of quiet confidence, his posture perfect, and without a hint of arrogance. He glanced over at his mother, Maria, who had been silently watching from the side. Maria's eyes met his, filled with quiet pride and unspoken understanding. Zane had shown everyone in this room just what kind of man he was, and that had nothing to do with his background. "Mom," Zane said softly, his voice steady. "Remember when you said I would show these people who we really are?" Maria, her heart swelling with love and admiration for her son, nodded. Her tired hands, those hands that had worked tirelessly in Sarah's mansion for years, trembled slightly. Zane had done more than win a chess game. He had proven, in front of these people, that worth couldn't be measured by wealth. It came from something deeper, something earned. "Yes, son," Maria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, you did." Zane turned back toward Sarah, his face calm but carrying a weight that no one in the room could ignore. "Thank you for the game, Ms. Caldwell," he said, his tone polite, but firm. It was educational. He didn't wait for a response, simply turning and walking away from the table. Maria followed, her apron now discarded and left behind, an outward symbol of the dignities Zane had just restored to them both. But as they reached the door, Zane paused, glancing back at Sarah one final time. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "thank you for showing me that my son deserves much better than this." With that, Zane and Maria left the penthouse, their footsteps echoing in the stillness that now filled the room. The guests, who had once looked at Zane with nothing more than condescending amusement, now sat in stunned silence. Sarah had lost not only the game but also any sense of superiority she had once held. The mockery she had intended to inflict had backfired in the most unexpected way. The following day, the video of the game quickly spread across social media. It was everywhere, shared by millions, tweeted by news outlets, and even picked up by international websites. The footage of the young man, dismissed as just another servant's son, playing chess with Sarah, the wealthy businesswoman, and winning in such a stunning fashion, captivated the world. People marveled at Zane's skill, at his grace under pressure, and at the way he had dismantled Sarah's arrogance piece by piece. But it wasn't just the chess world that took notice. Zane began to receive multiple invitations from international chess clubs, renowned for holding some of the most prestigious competitions in the world. Clubs from countries like Russia, India, and Spain, where chess had been a national passion for centuries, reached out to him, eager to have him compete on their teams. The offers flooded in, not scholarships to universities, but the kind of recognition that every serious chess player dreams of, invitations to compete against the best in the world. For Zane, this was not just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. It was the confirmation that his dedication had paid off. All those late nights, the solitary study sessions, and the countless games he had played in silence were finally being recognized on an international stage. This was his moment, and he knew that nothing, not even the prejudice he had faced, could take that away. As for Sarah, her world began to crumble in ways she never expected. Her reputation, once untouchable, began to deteriorate. The same people who had once praised her now distanced themselves, their whispers full of disdain. It wasn't just about chess anymore. Zane had done something much bigger. He had exposed her, her ignorance, her arrogance, and her belief that money and status were the true measures of a person's worth. Months later, Zayn stood in the halls of a prestigious international chess tournament, preparing for his first competition. He had already played against some of the best, but now he was about to face even greater challenges. The competition was fierce, but he felt calm. This was his world, the one he had fought for, and he was ready to show it. And Sarah, once at the top of her social circle, was now the subject of ridicule. The moment she had tried to make a fool of Zayn had been the moment her world began to fall apart. The lessons she had learned were bitter ones. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. I want to know where you're watching from, and let me know how this story inspired you. Stay tuned for more powerful stories just like this.